A short time ago in a galaxy nearby, a podcast was made to inspire and entertain. Casual Space. Making space available, one story at a time. Your host with grace, Beth Mund.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Casual Space this week. Hi, I'm your host, Beth Mund. Happy Labor Day. If you're listening to this before the holiday, I hope you have a great, safe holiday. And if you're listening to this before the holiday, I want to tell you about something happening tonight. Now, I'm recording this on a Friday, and this Friday, a very special guest of the show, someone who I love always catching up with and talking with, is Mark O'Connell. And Mark is going to be on Ancient Aliens tonight. Yeah, you know the show. It's really popular. It's on the History Channel. You know all about it. And tonight, he's going to be in season 21, talking about the legacy of J. Allen Hynek. Now, if you don't know about Mark, I highly recommend you just stay right here in Casual Space and search the episodes. There are several where Mark was our special guest. And you know, I always said to myself, I'm not going to touch the UFOs. I'm not touching aliens or UFOs. Well, how can you have a space podcast and not go there, right? But Mark is very well versed, very well researched, and I so loved his book. So I really recommend, if you want to know more about Project Blue Book, J. Allen Hynek, well, of course, listen to the episodes with Mark. But tonight, tune into History Channel, 8 o'clock Eastern, and let me see, 8 p.m. Central, tonight, August 29th, and streaming the following day. He said, and this is a note from Mark. He said, as Dr. Hynek's biographer, I never pass up an opportunity to talk about this brilliant, historic, heroic astronomer and ufologist. Tune in tonight to find out how Dr. Hynek, quote, made the world believe in UFOs. All right, so don't miss it if you get a chance. And of course, you can always catch it probably online on the History Channel, Ancient Aliens with friend of the show, Mark O'Connell. All right. Speaking of great people who get to talk about great things and meet others that influence us, I am still unpacking and enjoying and reading this phenomenal book, the biography, speaking of biographies, of Walt Disney. This book is by Bob Thomas. I mentioned it last week on the show, along with my fall reading list. So if you missed that episode, I highly recommend you go back because I'm already knee deep into the second and third books. I kind of, maybe like you do too, I read a little here and there, and I start a couple books at a time. Well, I am in the middle right now of the book on the list that was called Fighting for Space. Oh my gosh. So please tune in, join with me and read these incredible works so that we can talk about them together here on the show. Now, why Disney? Well, Disney does have a connection to space, actually. He worked very closely with Wernher von Braun. Did you know that? Of course you did. You're casual space listeners. You knew all about this. You can probably tell me more, and there's probably more books out there that I would love to hear about and you can recommend about exactly that and how it influenced his designs for Epcot and so on and so forth. Please send them my way. I would love to do a whole nother episode and read up about that. It would be fantastic. But today, what really moved me throughout this book was the theme of persistence, especially with Walt Disney. As we know, Walt Disney failed a lot. I want to talk today a little bit about, we see this huge company that is the Walt Disney enterprise, and you and I have benefited from the beautiful stories and animation, the soundtracks, the movies, the entertainment, Mickey Mouse. I mean, whoever you are in the world, you can point to something that Disney has influenced, or we have been influenced by, or enjoyed, or maybe, whatever it is, Disney is pretty well known, but it wasn't always like that. And persistence played the key role in making Disney Disney. And it's that theme I wanted to share with you today because I'm certainly learning from it in his book, and I wanted to continue walking down. So would you join me and just for this episode, let's walk together through this incredible characteristic of persistence and how the real magic for Disney was in persistence and not necessarily perfection. Okay, we all love the myth of that creative genius, the one who faces adversity and triumphs through grit and changes the world. That's Walt Disney in a nutshell. But the best stories are the stories of failure. No one, I heard this from a pastor who I love following and I love his work. His name is Rob Bell. And Rob used to say on his podcast, I think he still occasionally steps into his podcast, and he says, no one wants to go to a cocktail party and meet someone for the first time and say, so what do you do? And the other person responds and saying, well, I tried Olympic downhill skiing and I got a gold there. And then I tried writing a book and it was a bestseller. And then I decided to sing and I got all these Grammys. Nobody wants that. I don't want to talk to that person at the party, and I don't want to be that person. The story you resonate with, the story that keeps you focused and leaned in a little at that cocktail party, is the story of the person who failed. Who failed. Am I right? We're human. It's the story that you want to lean into where that person lost all their money and bet the farm, and wouldn't you know, erasers were already invented. Or the person who just, has something really interesting that may or may not work or failed in the past, but they're back at it, or they never ever got to finish the marathon and they're in training right now, working hard to make that dream come true. That's the person you want to talk to, right? That's the person I want to read about as well and learn from. And I think we don't often value or look at the value of these failures and how we can learn from them. So I'm going to unpack them today. So, once again, the book is called Walt Disney, an American Original by Bob Thomas. And Disney never waited in the book for the perfect time. There was no perfect time. He built his entire enterprise through loss, through fear, despite what the critics have said. And I am no Walt Disney. I am no Walt Disney by far. And for me to compare myself to him is pretty bold. However, I think I, along with you, have experienced stories of where you built or designed or stepped into something when you weren't ready. The timing wasn't right. You weren't quite ready to hit the button on purchasing your first home. You weren't ready to leave the house and go to college. This is certainly happening this time of year, right? I wasn't ready to launch Casual Space. I had all these episodes pre-recorded and in the hopper, and everyone is like, so push the button. So get these episodes out. I had like 10 because that's what they told me. You got to have 10 episodes ready to go, perfectly edited, and then you launch. And I just did what they told me. I wasn't ready. I felt like, who's going to listen to this? And here we are, nearly 300 episodes later. I guess some of you are listening, which I'm so grateful. You're not ready, right? I'm not ready to start my non-for-profit. You're not ready to change jobs. There's never a good time, a perfect time. I'm certainly not ready for my kids to continue into this next grade. I mean, they were just sitting on my lap reading books at night, and we were doing the whole nighttime thing. And here we are. But you know what? You can't wait. You can't wait until the thing is ready or life gets easier. We've got to start laying the foundations now. And that's what I'm taking from this Disney book. I love reading about the man behind the mouse. And I'm going to start to break down a couple of these themes with you about persistence through the course of his life. So let's walk through a little bit of Disney's life in consecutive order. And let's start with the early years. Okay. Walt Disney said, all the adversities I've had in my life, all the troubles and obstacles, they've all strengthened me. Okay, Walt Disney grew up in a really strict home. He had grueling work. There's stories about him as a paper boy for many, many years, not just a couple, but pretty much all through his childhood. And because he grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, actually almost pretty much downtown Chicago, it was bitter. It was cold. Several times he would go inside of buildings, deliver the papers, and then curl up next to the heater to warm up just before he went to the next building. He also grew up in Kansas, and he endured long, hard hours working on the farm, working to deliver the papers, and sometimes he would ride the rails. and he would sell candies and sodas to the people on the train. And a couple of times they would steal his money. He would take his eyes off the money he would collect and he'd go back out and sell some candy and it would be stolen by the end of the day. After all day going from train to station, and his money would often get stolen. This is not easy, right? How hard is it for us to keep going, especially when we are younger and we're learning these lessons? Like, what's it worth? What am I doing? I'm trudging through the snow. I'm bitter cold so I can make a couple pennies delivering papers. Yeah, back in the day, I'm sure Walt was asking that. But it makes us hardened. It gives us that grit. You got to get up before the morning rush hour so the people have their papers. Now, I don't know about you, but you ever spent time in a job where you went unnoticed and your work went unnoticed, or you did these long, hard hours and they maybe weren't seen, they were unseen, but you were laying the foundation. I remember one of my first corporate jobs at Motorola, and I remember all these people left and right of me who have to go home and pick up the kids from school early, like way before 5, or they'd have to get home or go to an appointment or something. And I thought, why are you leaving? The work's not done. How does that work? When do I get to leave? And because I was there trying to make a mark for myself and trying to prove that I was worth the corporate climb and to be promoted, I just worked until the work was done. And those meant long hours that went unseen. And I had no idea at the time that I was laying the foundation for a work ethic that would pay off years down the road. Okay, back to Disney. Here's another great quote. Everyone falls down. Getting up is how you learn to walk. Yeah, Walt Disney. His first studio was called Laughograms, and it collapsed within a year. He went bankrupt. He left Kansas City, and he had nothing but a suitcase and some stubborn hope. But that was just the start of his story. He started the seeds of a much bigger story. When he was in Kansas, he also had to sell his horse on the family farm. This is a story I love so much. I'm so glad I get to tell it and share it with you again in the book. And he and his brother had to bring the horse to the cellar. And one day, and they were devastated because they had grown to love this horse. They rode the horse. Horses were more than just transportation. They helped with chores, they provided, and so they became very close to the horse. This was the family horse back on the farm in Kansas. And one day, after things got really destitute, they had to obviously sell the horse, take the horse to the cellar. And one day, Roy, one of Disney's brothers, and Disney, Walt, were walking into town to get some goods, and they hear their horse. They hear the horse. The horse had escaped the gate and the fence from the latest owner and found the boys. And they hugged and they cried and they had to do the heartbreaking thing of bringing the horse back to the seller's homestead and say goodbye to the horse one last time. Ah, grit, right? Working hard. I love that story. So heartwarming. Sometimes you make things, they don't work out. One of the first things that Disney put together was not a mouse. The Mickey story is infamous, but it's not how he started. It was Oswald, the rabbit. Have you heard this? Perhaps you have. Oswald was this fun looking, very close to Mickey looking rabbit. And it was something that Walt did to animate, to get paid, to think that this was going to be the future of his animation journey. And he ended up losing Oswald the rabbit due to ownerships and contracts and deeper weeds within the story that I'm not going to go into here. But it was stolen from a contract dispute, and he nearly lost his whole team of animators in the process. And on the hard train ride home from trying to negotiate keeping Oswald, he created Mickey. Sometimes our best innovations begin with loss. Sometimes you got to lose it all to discover where you really want to end up being. The client cancels, the job evaporates, the relationships that you built and you counted on fizzle out. These are hard lessons, right? And sometimes you're staring at a blank page and at an empty space that you didn't ask for. And these losses hurt, I know, but they create space for possibilities as well. They create space for the next innovation, the next evolution of whatever is going to come into your life for you to grab hold of and create and make. Disney's biggest breakthrough didn't come from the space that he left behind, but one from one of his most earliest and most heartbreaking failures. Doesn't that give you a little bit of respite to know, like, oh, Disney failed so big in such a big way that he absolutely had to create Mickey on the train ride home, or we wouldn't even know his name. I love that. Okay, after Walt finally got settled and he started with Mickey and Mickey became known and these beautiful shorts that would be shown in theaters across the country, people started to recognize Disney and his animators and his name. And then came times for movies. And during the Great Depression, Disney mortgaged everything to make Snow White, and it had to work. Now, at first, critics called Snow White Disney's Folly, and it really hurt Disney. And by the premiere, Disney was nearly bankrupt and he was absolutely exhausted. But he bet everything on this movie and it became a cultural phenomenon. How many of us have seen Snow White? There's something about that classic and beautiful animation that withholds the test of time. And I'm talking about the original Snow White, by the way. Sometimes our vision looks reckless, right? It looks like having that steady job that we leave to chase a dream seems ridiculous. Sometimes putting all your savings into that bucket to bet the farm also looks ridiculous. You know people who have done this, maybe you've done it yourself. In the moment and at the time, you're just thinking, oh my gosh, is it going to work? Is this ridiculous? What am I doing? What is she doing? How, what? There's something about this, about waiting for that green light and going before the green light and doing it all and betting it all. There's something in that ether that just brings me tingles down my spine to be like, yeah, yeah, I know this place. I know what this is like. Why? Because you believe deep in your heart that this is it. You're willing to bet it all. You're not waiting. You're being persistent and you're laying the foundation. But the foundation is the thing. You're like, this has got to work. I know it. And I know it's so strong and so hard. I'm betting everything on it. Okay. Again, a little sidestep away from Disney to share with you my personal journey here, where I bet everything on a ticket to NASA. I would write and apply year after year, even though I was chasing a professional corporate job that was paying me a lot of money and I was becoming really well known. I was doing fantastic. My career path was pretty well set, it was pretty determined. And as soon as I remember the night and the moment and the place and the feelings where I was sitting in my cubicle that one fateful night where I saw it, I saw the job posting for NASA. And I knew it. I knew it in that moment. Now, I still had to do the formalities. And back then, there was just the online presence that was starting. And I think I've told you this story before, but I would have gone anywhere NASA asked me to. And as I was filling through the application, both typing it out and sending it electronically and writing paper copies to send to NASA, gathering my transcripts, all these things, I just knew that this was the thing that was going to work for me. And I was willing to bet it all. I was willing to walk away from my corporate job. I was willing to walk away from my friends, my family, my life that growing up in the Midwest, all for NASA. And you know what's funny? I didn't even know where I was going. I didn't even read the fine print that it was located in Houston, Texas. I remember going to my mom and dad and saying, I'm moving to NASA. I didn't say where. And they were like, which NASA? Because there's several. And I was like, oh, allegedly it's the Johnson Space Center. And they're like, yeah, in Houston. Do you know where Houston is? I'm like, nope, I'm going. I didn't even care. I didn't even care. This was my vision. Nothing was going to stop me. Was it reckless? Was I willing to bet the farm? Was it worth it? Sometimes being persistent looks reckless. During the war, Disney would have a lot of uncertainty. He had been building Snow White. He had been building the things that were working for him because he knew they would. And he kept being persistent with his movies, his adventures, his innovations, his camera work, multi-plane camera that he invented. All of these things were coming along, and then the war hits. And the 1940s brought strikes and war and mounting debt. So Disney's original vision was greatly disrupted, and he pivoted to propaganda films for the Army and for the US government and live action experiments. Now, I love this story because Disney had already built his studios and he was hosting his animators there. Sometimes, again, kind of tells you more about the character of Walt Disney World. And this isn't in my notes, this is just from me remembering the impact that Disney made with a story as simple as this. When he would bring in new animators, they would have talent, but not necessarily the skill needed for what Disney wanted them to do. So he took them to animation school. He let them go to night school. And sometimes these animators would move across the country, come to work for Disney, and they wouldn't have a car or a place to stay. Disney would personally drive them to class, and he would personally pick them up and take them back to their homes or to the studio. And oftentimes, the animators would sleep in the studios, in cots, and live there so they'd be ready for work the next day. So, going to school at night so they could sharpen their skills and get what Disney expected out of them, and then just stay there and sleep there and go to work the next day. Well, these corporate places on campus that Disney had built in these buildings soon would be taken over by the US Army so that a lot of things would be stored there. They were obviously based in California. So at the height of the Pearl Harbor bombing, a lot of people became guards and protectors in the state of California, obviously. And so they needed to move into the space. And by the way, they didn't ask. And Disney could have been confrontational. He could have said, no, you can't. Well, he really couldn't have. They didn't ask. They just kind of moved in. But Disney made it a place for them to call home and be comfortable during the time. How many times have we experienced adversity where we have even just a long guest in our house? We can choose to be like, oh my God, it's been long enough. It's time to go, right? And we can fight about it, whine about it, whatever. Or we can embrace it, be innovative, pivot, be persistent, and still chase our goal. He didn't shut down the studios. He continued by pivoting and making these propaganda films. Talk about persistence. Talk about finding the silver lining. Incredible. Later on, after the war, um, with mounting debt, Disney would find that banks would not back him. Critics continued to laugh because they're like, what are you, a war movie maker now? Or are you still an animator? Even Roy, his own brother, was skeptical about the next steps for Disney. But Disney, Walt Disney, persisted. And he had a vision that no one saw coming, that had been working quietly behind the scenes for many years. And in 1955, Walt Disney would open and propose to start Disneyland. Disneyland, the place we all love and enjoy and appreciate. Unless you're a Walt Disney World person, which I prefer. But California is great. We've been there as well. It's just as phenomenal, just different in its own ways. And your Disneyland, your personal metaphorical Disneyland, might look quite different. Maybe it's starting a business that no one expected of you, or a hobby. Maybe you're joining a team. Last summer, or maybe it was earlier this spring, I decided that I needed a new hobby, but something a little more physical and maybe with a little more aggression to it because I play volleyball pretty aggressively. But I can't keep up with volleyball the way I want to. So I decided to try out for roller derby. Yes, women's roller derby. Now, I'm pretty tall. I'm about 5'11" on a regular day. I am 5'11". And I'm about 6'2" on the skates, which makes me the biggest, tallest target you can find in the entire derby and throughout the rink, no matter whether I'm the home team or the away team. I'm the tallest, I'm the biggest, I'm the target. Well, I wasn't expecting that when I started my Disneyland experience to go try something new. And that was only 2 weeks. I think like 8 or 7 practices. I would gear up, I would put in the mouth guard, I would do all the drills. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not as quick and fast and capable as some of these speedy ones around me. I'm like the tallest, slowest, most vulnerable. So it didn't work out. And I've tried a million other things. I've had businesses, I've had jobs. We've all had career paths or that one job or that one relationship or that one, maybe even friendship. And you're like, okay, no, this is not going to work out. And it seems impossible. But here's one of the best quotes by Disney. It's kind of fun to do the impossible. I love that quote. I'm not personally a tattoo person, but if I ever did get a tattoo, that would be up there in the things I would consider getting. It's kind of fun to do the impossible. He also said the way to get started is to quit talking and start working. That is so profound, right? This persistence like, okay, no one wants to believe in my Disney idea, Disneyland. I'm just going to start working. I'll build it and then you'll see it. And when I started Stories of Space, the non-for-profit, there were so many things to figure out. I had no idea that running a 501(c)(3) was going to include so much legal work, accounting, um, leadership, growing the team, building the board. I had no idea. I just thought we could take stories to space in this truly unique way. It doesn't mean I gave up. It just means I had to roll up my sleeves and get to work and do the impossible. And let me tell you, the impossible is quite fun. 5 missions in under 2.5 years. We've had a ton of fun. But again, it would be easier to give up. It would be easier to say, I don't know how do I do this. I kept asking, well, why can't we try to do it? And then I'm finding ways of getting it done. Can we relate? Persistence can also look like legacy, and persistence can also look like, even though it might not be yours, it can be something you enable and give to others. Unfortunately, Disney did not live to see his Disneyland and Disney World truly evolve into his dream place known as Epcot. And if you call my mom today, she would tell you what Epcot stands for. She's always known it. I find that such a cute fact. Um, you can call her, call Bonnie, and ask her what does Epcot stand for right now. She'll tell you. She knows. But even as Disney's health failed towards the end, he kept sketching and planning for Epcot. By the way, experimental prototype, City of Tomorrow, Epcot. He died, unfortunately, before it was finished, but the foundations that he made were strong enough for others to carry it forward, and they did. Of course, his brother Roy, and of course, the many, many, many Disney Imagineers that would take his plans and put it into fruition to what we see and enjoy and appreciate today. Beautiful, amazing world showcase, future of tomorrow, beautiful Epcot. So, not everything that you and I do has to revolve around completing it for us, for ourselves. It's also valid that we build foundations for others. Not only does it feel good, but it helps you carry those lessons into others' lives and through your legacy. Some of them you'll never even hear about or know about. Those are some of my favorites. Maybe not while you're alive. And you might publish something today that will inspire someone years from now. Years from now, you might invest in something that others and generations after you will benefit from. That is the persistence. That is the message and the theme that I love taking from this book, from this journey with Disney. And it very much is very relevant to space exploration in the sense that when we explore today and we go somewhere incredibly far, we don't get that data back oftentimes for years, years and years. There are some weird things going through our universe right now. I would try to say it, but I know I'll get it wrong. They call it At first, they thought it was an asteroid. Then they thought it was something else. Maybe it's a spaceship. It could be foreign aliens from another part of another solar system. I want to say Amawana. I don't know. I'm getting it wrong. It's not right here in front of me, but you know what I'm talking about. It's this huge object that came around once and then came around again. And we're like, what is this thing? It's not from our solar system. And because it's not from our solar system and it's not an asteroid, what the heck is it? And how did it get here? This is phenomenal. Again, Amawana. I can't. I can hear you. I can hear all of you right now as you're listening. You're yelling it out, and I apologize. Send me an email. Tell me how to say it. It was recently discovered, and we're still trying to learn more about it, but these things are out there. We send probes out, we get the data back years and years. There's a wonderful story by another friend and author here on the show about John Cassani and how much planetary exploration he and the teams at NASA that he did throughout the 50s and 60s. We're still getting that data back today. Today. I always tell people whenever I'm keynoting or delivering a speech for corporations and lessons learned and in front of organizations, and they want me to tell the Columbia story, I always point to the crew that Elon Ramon and Colton Chawla, Elon Ramon in particular, had an experiment on board that had to do with a weather experiment, collecting data from storms. And we are still getting the data back today. He left a legacy. Now, unfortunately, he and the Columbia crew perished, but the data is still showcasing information for us today. So persistence in flying, in building, in exploring, in writing, in taking risks, in betting the farm, quit talking and start doing, having fun, doing the impossible. Persistence. I love from Disney's story learning about the real measure of progress and knowing that it's not that we have to feel ready. It's not about waiting for the green light, but how we're willing to take the risk and keep creating anyway, even when we're not ready. I wasn't ready to do this podcast. And here we are. And I'm really glad because I'd rather share this with you than not. I'd rather put myself out there and hear 5 of you resonate with this than 5,000. I don't want perfection. Neither did Disney. It comes from persistence, from building in the hard times and from being human, from putting it out there. And what we're surviving now and what we're going through is not our last chapter. It's just the prologue to stories we have not even yet imagined. So thank you so much for being with me this week. Thank you for letting me walk through this profound lesson that I'm continuing to learn from this book about persistence. And when it comes to space exploration, you already know this. When it comes to how we have to innovate for the future so that we get that data and so we help lay the foundations for others to build on, you already know this. Thank you for what you do. If this is part of your work and your daily grind, thank you for what you're creating. Thank you for taking the risk. And thanks for not waiting until that green light to do whatever it is you're here to do. Thanks for also building those foundations so others can follow in your footsteps. All right. So I'm going to wrap up and go get ready to tune in to Ancient Aliens tonight so I can watch my friend Mark and learn more about J. Allen Hynek. I already know a little bit about this story, but if you don't, and if you're not familiar, it is so profound to hear the moment where someone had a belief over here and changed it to something over here. And don't we need that now more and more in our day today these days? I think so. So I'm going to listen to that pivotal story again tonight on Ancient Aliens. And I'll let you know in the show notes and in future communications on all the socials where you find Casual Space, where you can watch replays of tonight's episode of Ancient Aliens. But for now, thank you so much. It's kind of fun to do the impossible. I hope you're doing it in your own way and laying the foundations for others. See you next week right here on Casual Space. Take care. Happy Labor Day.
If you enjoyed this episode, give it some stars by rating and reviewing it on your podcast platform. Embrace the space. Casual space.